What is happening in our world right now? Are you still wondering when things will return to the way they were? Or have you accepted that something fundamental has changed and the world you thought existed is no more? And wherever you are on this continuum between longing for a past that is fast receding and accepting the emergence of a world as yet unknown, what meaning, if any, can be made at this time out of what is happening to humanity worldwide? And what, if anything, can be done about it? It's said that the veil between the living and the dead thins this time of year. Certain traditions, Samhain, Halloween, Dia de los Muertos, acknowledge this veil and the way much of the time it blinds us to the truth that the spirit world accompanies us on all our life journeys. And at times it seeks not only to be acknowledged, but to be listened to and understood. Hi, this is Sequoia. Welcome to my podcast. Thanks for dropping by. Today is November 2nd, 2020, All Souls Day. And in this episode, I invite you to join me in exploring the idea of spiritual wayfaring, also known as pilgrimage. The call to such a journey, the demands, the needed preparations, and who or what we might meet on the road. So grab a sweater, pull up a comfortable chair, and join me in the garden around the fire as we peel back the layers of the program known as the 20th century and think together about pilgrimage, shadow, and illusion in the realm of the hungry ghosts. So let's start with this idea of pilgrimage and define it. Pilgrimage is typically thought of as a journey of some sort, often to a sacred place, which is of moral or spiritual significance. And it often involves travel through or to an unknown or foreign place. And it's not just about the travel, of course. There's an objective, which is new or expanded awareness and meaning. So that's the first part of pilgrimage, this journey through an unknown place in search of awareness and meaning. There's a couple other things that I think are important about pilgrimage too. One of them has to do with this concept of devotion. Devotion being very different from impulse. There's fleeing, which is not pilgrimage. Deciding to pack up and move from Los Angeles, for example, to Bozeman, Montana, that's not a pilgrimage. It may ultimately result in the effects of pilgrimage over time with proper reflection, but it's not pilgrimage. Devotion implies practice, and it implies preparation. and perseverance, right? So there's a material aspect of pilgrimage, the preparations to actually make a physical journey of some kind. And then, of course, there's the spiritual aspects. It's entrance into some sort of transformation that's actively being sought. And then there's a more of a collective component to it. There's a circularity to pilgrimage in the sense that part of what pilgrimage is about is that you return to your community of practice with changed awareness, and then that changed awareness feeds forward into the community in positive ways. And assuming that there's a devotional and spiritual aspect of this, you're trying to become a better human being through the pilgrimage that you're undertaking. So if you think about pilgrimage ecologically, it's sort of the idea of the raindrop becoming the brook, becoming the stream, becoming the river, becoming the ocean, and then all the droplets rising again into the clouds and sprinkling down in this very circular, restorative type of process. So how does that relate to our moment in time? How does pilgrimage relate to COVID and to the incredible dislocations that are underway worldwide in human society as a result of this idea of an invisible virus that we were told was going to result in mass apocalypse, which is now a story running inside people's heads. And I would suggest that at this moment, human beings are being called to pilgrimage, to a journey of material and spiritual transformation. And I invite you to explore this idea with me through two questions. What is the call? And why now? Imagine you are on a path on the crest of a hill, and below you, at the bottom of a steep drop-off, is a small lake, glittering through tall trees, sun shining on it. There is a path, steep and rocky, that leads down through the trees in the direction of the lake. And from your vantage point, on the other side of the lake, a trail winds toward the far horizon. Now turn and look behind you. There is a city. Its once glittering skyline now engulfed in flames. Thick black smoke billowing from within it. And faintly, from deep within that city, you can hear screaming, chanting, drum beats. You can feel the terror emanating from that place. Now turn again and look at the lake below you and the far horizon beyond it. Listen to the sound of the wind moving in the trees. Notice the clouds moving across the sky. The smell of rain is in the air. There is some bird song. Small creatures are passing unseen beneath your feet, while other animals have walked the trail you now seek to follow. Notice the calm which exists here on this hill overlooking this lake. The paradox of it. Behind you is a world burning, and on the distant horizon before you lies a place unknown. And between these 2 points you stand, on a hill. You are in liminal space, a point where the past has receded, but the future is not yet manifest. And the trail before you is like a moonlit field upon which snow has just fallen. This is an ambiguous place, and a powerful one. And like all powerful places, it has its guardians. I know a couple who just had their first baby. Babies represent the most tremendous new beginning for we members of the human family. And paradoxically, the birth of a baby, especially a first baby, also represents an ending of the old life, the way things were before the baby arrived. Babies are a tremendous gift. They demand from their parents many things, especially continuous learning. And this isn't intuitive or natural learning, at least not all the time, because sometimes what the baby needs isn't right for the parents. You know, there's obvious things like getting up at 3 a.m. to change a diaper when you'd really rather sleep. And less obvious things like giving up certain cherished habits because they don't set a good example for the child. And there's more existential things like eventually the process of letting go of your ideals for them to recognize and affirm who they actually are. All of these are part of this existential dance of parenting. How in a new baby, parents encounter in manifest form that we're not here for ourselves, but for something greater. And in the gift that is that a baby, parents have the opportunity by how they parent that child to become over time better people themselves. The soul is also a baby. And like any baby, it makes demands on us. Soul babies herald their presence at first through the tiny questions that come in the night. Who am I? Why am I here? What is this world that I'm living in? And like physical babies, the demands of soul babies, their insistence, for example, on exploring these existential questions, can be placated for a while with baubles. New cars, new houses, new jobs, new spouses, distractions that decade after decade can create the illusion that all is well. But unlike a physical baby who will grow up and eventually vacate the premises, a soul baby whose persistent questions are ignored will remain small and unformed, and in the vacuum left by its failure to develop, other entities will enter, the way wild animals will enter a house that is vacant and untended. And eventually, the facade will begin to crumble as the entities which have taken up residence in the basement and the walls chew through into the main house or flood out into the street and begin to spread to other people's homes, revealing an undeveloped soul, the vermin that have taken up residence alongside it, and the chaos that's been going on inside that house for a very long time. From a spiritual perspective, in the wake of COVID, it appears as if a large majority of the houses on our streets are suddenly falling down. Our spiritual house is in a serious state of disrepair, and suggests that the emergence at this time of the crisis we're in is actually the demand of millions of soul babies who are requiring answers to these questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And what is this world that I'm living in? It's a call that represents both an ending and a beginning. It's a call to the pilgrimage of awakening to the truth of the world we are in and the truth of who we are as magical, spiritual beings embodied in material form. It truly is a crisis. And the Romans considered such circumstances, individually and collectively, to be the purview of Janus, the two-faced god, guardian of two gates, the gate of beginnings and the gate of endings. And between these gates lies an uncharted, unclaimed territory, a neutral zone through which we all must pass on a journey toward expanded meaning and awareness of who we are, the world we are living in, and how our beliefs about both influence and shape both our individual and our collective future. We're being called to a pilgrimage, both material and spiritual. We're being asked to behave like thoughtful, good enough parents, people who do what is right rather than what is easy, because it's best for the soul's development. People who grapple with ambiguity and situations we feel unprepared for, who are willing to ask difficult questions, face unpleasant answers, take actions that are frightening and that may have negative personal consequences and that we may not want to do, but that morality and higher purpose require us to take. This is the call. This is what COVID represents. The emergence of demons and ghosts from dark places which have been unattended and in which they've grown large and strong, having had plenty to eat and only babies to oppose them. So here we stand beneath the gate of endings, the gate of beginnings. A city in flames at our back, and in the distance, an unknown land. We are journeying into wilderness, a place unmapped, a neutral zone. So as we prepared for this journey, what kind of place is this? And what can we expect to find here? The Sanskrit word samsara alludes to an aimless circularity of life, death, and rebirth, the general idea being that actions invariably exert influences, both on the terrain and the direction of a single life, and of a soul's journey through dimensions and worlds. And in this cosmology, a soul, a pilgrim, a wanderer, traverses the wheel of life, death, and rebirth, and under the influence of past lives, good deeds, education, effort, may be born into one of three realms: the realm of form, the realm of formlessness, and the realm of desire. And when we are born in human form, we inhabit the realm of desire. But we're not alone in the realm of desire. We share it with other types of entities, and they all interact energetically with each other, creating the difficulties that an individual encounters in a lifetime. And difficulties are important because they provide the seeds by which an individual can attain awareness and free themselves in the realm of desire from this endless cycle of mindless difficulty. to be born as a human is very fortunate for a soul, because it carries the most potential to transcend samsara. So what are those other domains within the realm of desire? There's a God or an angelic domain, thought of as bliss, which you can think of as a very clear, powerful energy that exists for hard work in the spiritual domain. So perhaps you're really, really good in a previous life. The catch, though, with bliss or the God domain is that it has potential downfall for those who are complacent and who stop working on their soul's development. And I have two examples that I think of that come to mind for me of the God or angelic domain. And this is like small g God, right? Both Galadriel and Sammaron, the wizard in The Lord of the Rings, embody this energy. Galadriel, by her recognition of a test of her, whether she's really refined her soul enough to resist greed, she turns away from the ring, recognizes its implications for her, that her power will diminish, that she has transcended the trap of power. In contrast to that, Saruman the wizard fails to transcend the test of power and becomes corrupted morally and spiritually. So whatever previous good deeds he had done were canceled out by the mistakes he made at that level. And there's another layer, another small g God, the domain of jealous gods. And these are souls who are strongly egotistical or envious or jealous in a previous life, and who are tormented by those who they consider their equal in terms of power, but who they also perceive to have it easier than they do. And a story that I think represents this energy very well is that of Gladiator and the character Commodus, the powerful son who is really characterologically weak. He's quite cowardly. And he does a lot of very treacherous things, always excusing his morally deficient behavior by blaming it on other people. Then, of course, there is the human domain, which is considered part of the heavenly domain. Maximus in Gladiator is an example of a human who transcends the pain and suffering of his immediate life and stays focused always on his ultimate objective, which is to be reunited in another world with the people who he loves and the place that he loved, his farm. And then there are these three domains of hell: animals, hungry ghosts, and demons. The animal domain, which we can see from where we are, we're very closely linked with animals and animal energies, is reserved for those who lived with stupidity and prejudice in a previous life, who were driven by instinct and impulse and their excess appetites, and who preyed on each other. And then there's hungry ghosts, which represent those who have strongly possessive behaviors in a previous life, attachments and desires that can never be satisfied. And in imagery, they're often represented as having huge stomachs and tiny mouths. And then there's the demons of hell. These are entities who have exhibited tremendous hate in a previous life. And this particular cosmology with these layers and levels has a parallel in Christian cosmology, with heaven, earth, and hell being the places of angels, humans and animals, and demons or fallen angels, respectively. The point I would draw your attention to is that this landscape can be thought of energetically and has within it all of these different types of energies: the small g gods and jealous gods, animals, hungry ghosts, and demons. And they're all interacting with us, humans in material form, carrying our soul babies within us. And they can play with us because we are, in fact, the most powerful in this domain, because we are both material, embodied, and spiritual. So, for example, to think about those energies, consider how Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, all of them exhibit in various ways. Little g, God energy of bliss and power. And in the current moment, the human who most exemplifies the hungry ghost, in my view, is Hunter Biden. And if you learn about his history, the death of his mother, the death of his sister, the death of his brother, if you look at his face, you can see that emptiness in his eyes. That is some need there that can never be satisfied. The energy of both demonic and jealous gods showed up in the French Revolution. This clash between mediocre people who were bureaucratizing an entire country. And if you study the Robespierre and the committee base, see how they were continuously coming up with new words and new rules and new meaning, driving people mad with the insanity of it, until finally the demonic erupted through the people and they started literally chopping their heads off. That is one of the ways in which this energy manifests itself through our human forms. As you see how twisty the energy becomes. So I would encourage you to think about these energies as part of a LARP, a live action role play, in which humanity is the main character. And all of these other energies function either as non-player characters or actually as part of your own character. And you pick them up or put them down in accordance with either your own volition or some gap in your own soul through which they can enter and then begin to drive the game. And this taxonomy of energies is something that all religious traditions acknowledge in various ways. The task of the spiritual pilgrim is to learn to recognize that within through whatever lens or frame you choose to use. Because it is the task of pilgrims to journey through the uncharted territory in which these entities are all a part. And it's important to be aware of them and of the role they're playing in influencing both individuals and the collective. Because awareness of that is what enables us to begin to see through the veil and recognize who or what is animating it. So now, what are the preparations that we need to make for this pilgrimage, the journey through the wilderness, leaving behind the world that was, and moving toward the world that is emerging? So, first I would say for a pilgrimage, one needs navigational aids, compass and map, and a North Star. And that North Star is, of course, your soul baby that's guiding and directing you in your unique journey. That's the spiritual component to be aware of, having skills to listen to and develop that, as it is the most powerful navigational aid we possess. That soul baby within each of us that links us directly to Source, and that only requires that we learn to become still and go within and listen for it to begin to reveal itself and invite us to participate through the making of a different world, a world of material beauty that reflects that awareness, the conscious awareness of how it is in what humans make and create that we invite into and reflect outward the light that lives within us. And you only need to think of something like a shaker box or a Guarneri violin to understand what I mean. Or look at the architecture from pre-1900 to also see it. And there's also, in the material realm, there are skills, a lot of skills, survival skills. More importantly, though, there's a sense of trust. trust in the skills and in the capacity of the world to provide us, humanity, with what we need in terms of shelter, in terms of food. And this is where I want to loop back for a moment to this idea of the hungry ghost and suggest to you that the world that you have been inhabiting, the world that we know as the 20th century, is itself at a profound level a demonic lie that has been carefully put into place in order to trick humanity into living continuously in a state of fear and distrust with regard to our capacity to have all of our basic needs met. And it is not exaggeration or hyperbole when I say that it is lies all the way down. The lie that there isn't enough room for us all. The lie that the earth cannot sustain us all. The lie that the world is a harsh and scary place, and that only an ideology like communism or socialism can save us. These are complex, interconnected lies, and there are thousands of them. Narratives that you and your parents and your grandparents were fed in order to conceal important truths from you. And at the heart of each, invariably, you will find fear being used one way or another as an instrument of control. The truth is that when we are in right relationship with our soul and with Source, and when we operate with integrity according to those two interrelated relationships, the world is, even with all the suffering that exists within it, a beautiful and abundant place. And when we form community with other people who are in right relationship with their souls and with Source, meaning that we acknowledge together practically moment to moment that we are spiritual beings having a material experience and that we are immortal, then we have nothing to fear. So I would suggest that there has been a very prolonged social engineering underway in this program known as the 20th century to create in each human being multiple hungry ghosts who will then function automatically to continuously draw you back into the cycle of seeking something imaginal and missing that the genuine spiritual and material satisfaction is well within your grasp. Even if it means you have to give up what you have right now because it's part of the illusion. It's part of the program of the 20th century, whether it's the suburban tract home or the so-called good job or the professional identity that you have. We are all tasked at this point with recognizing the various manifestations of hungry ghosts which we carry within us, and that if we take them on this journey with us, well, just think about it. Think about the implications of that. And you might want to be very vigilant for contract offers from the demonic realm. Demons are really big on contracts, such as universal basic income and some kind of trade-off whereby you're being offered, for example, debt forgiveness in exchange for enslavement under a revamped totalitarian system. Because remember, as this old world is crumbling, these entities are coming along. They want to have some input on what emerges from the ashes. And this is where understanding the energies in play in the realm of desire can be very useful, because there's no reason why a truly free human being who can grow their own food and make things with their hands and who can see with their own eyes that there are entire vast continents with no people on them can't just as easily respond to that contract offer by saying, you know what? You're right. Time to forgive the debts. They're gone. Wave your hands and they're gone. Why? Because we say so. Why are you waiting for the banker to tell you that they're going to graciously give you debt forgiveness? Did you create the system of lies that we're in? So just remember, the demon offers the contract. You don't have to take it. You can renegotiate that. And part of that renegotiation can say, yeah, I'm going to take the debt forgiveness, but I'm going to pass on that other part, that part about perpetual enslavement. Remember, you're the one that's powerful. They're counting on you never figuring that out. And it's very important to consider whether or not you want to have these remnants of the 20th century accompanying you on your pilgrimage. Like a golem. But there are a few other skills that can be helpful in recognizing the emergence and the presence of the hungry ghost in ourselves and others. And they have to do with shadow and illusion. So just as all beginnings are endings and all endings are beginnings, shadow and light share a similar relationship. They're not opposites, but two sides of a greater whole. Shadow is the foil for light, artistically speaking. And there are all sorts of nuances and permutations of this material aspect of shadow. Artistically, you can spend a lifetime learning how to perceive the play of shadow and light on a canvas or in a landscape. For example, I live in a place where I'm blessed to not have light pollution, and sometimes when we have a particularly bright moon, it's amazing the level of shadow that exists in my garden. The blues and the grays and the purples at 2 a.m. It's just remarkable, and the longer you sit in it, the more you can perceive because your eyes adjust. So that's the first thing I would say, is that you have to begin to develop the capacity to recognize that shadow and light are interrelated. Not to try to reject shadow, but to explore it. And not to think that it should all be light, because nothing but flat light is pretty boring. They work together to show us ourselves, each other, and the world that we're in. And another way to think about shadow is, as Carl Jung referred to it, as the aspects of ourselves, individually or collectively, that we don't wish to look at, or that we're unaware of. And, awareness, as unawareness moves toward awareness, can often become, we can do a lot of things to keep it out of consciousness, in the way that a person will try to hold a beach ball under the water, which, if you think about it, is really very difficult to do. So that's the essence of the unconsciousness and the dance we have with it, psychologically speaking. So consciousness and unconsciousness playing with each other. We can't be conscious of that which is unconscious, but we can learn to tell what it feels like when that beach ball is trying to emerge. And we can learn to understand when we ourselves are working against that process by trying to resubmerge it. And this actually relates in many ways to how sometimes we can be very rooted in our material selves. I'm this person in this 20th century world, and this is all there is, and don't necessarily have a lot of memory of prior lives, prior experiences. But I would suggest to you that you do have them. They're dormant. They're inside of you. They're waiting for things in the material world to ring the bell of memory. And one of the first layers of this has to do with resistance we have to the truths that other people are offering us. So if you look at the number of people who have fully embraced at this point the fear of COVID, my favorite example being the person you see driving by in their car, windows rolled up, gloves on, and masked in a vehicle alone. That's a person that's not going to be probably very open to any truths others may have about COVID, no matter how persuasive they are, scientifically, factually, or otherwise, regarding the survival rate, the demonic games that are being played with Words like with COVID versus from COVID, or cases versus deaths, and so on. Doesn't matter. They've embraced it. It's now part of their sense of self. You can see this in people who will not revisit the events of September 11, people who will not investigate the moon landing or NASA, people who will not take another look at John F. Kennedy's assassination, who insist it was the lone nut, people who blindly accept the assertions of science but won't run the experiments themselves with regard to things like the world we're living in or on. All of these examples come back to the same thing in terms of shadow. They are manifestations of how we, humanity, can get very confused and tangled up about the difference between who we are and what our beliefs are. Rather than tease apart the distinction, we have a tendency to hold more tightly to our ideas because we think they are who we are. So understanding shadow and how it plays into our capacity to be open in pilgrimage to the new information that will change us, and then by definition and extension, the world we're capable of creating, is very important. You can think of the manifestation of shadow as also helping to serve the status quo, the demonic gulag within which we're currently dwelling, because taken to an extreme, resistance in people who won't examine new information perpetuates lies through sheer inertia. And there's a lot of that dynamic in modern society. The discounting and the laughing off of truths, the not bothering at all to investigate them, but instead attacking the messenger. So shadow is both a personal issue and a collective issue. It's also important to recognize when the critical mass is working against you, when a willful refusal to recognize and face an elemental truth, even though the evidence is overwhelming. And I would suggest that we are at that point in this society. The evidence is overwhelming that we are not living in a human-created society, but one that is driven by something else that we need to look at together and figure out together. And that failing to look at it and allowing the most unconscious, dysfunctional members of our society to prevent us from looking at it, that's enabling shadow to recognize within yourself the emergence of it, and to learn to see how this pattern is reflected elsewhere, and to observe it, to comment on it, and develop the capacity to shine light onto them is a very important skill for a pilgrim. Because in commenting on it and drawing light onto it, just like any shadow, it lessens when you turn on the light. So that is the place that we're standing. These very malevolent shadows spreading across the landscape. And there's another concept related to shadow, equally important, I would say, and that is illusion. There's a polarity. There's artful illusion and artless deceit. And I would suggest to you that artful illusion can be thought of as the conscious material aspects of making and creating. Our artful illusion is the process by which, through skill and experience, we can create better results, and thus help to generate a world of higher vibrations, the vibrations that are naturally conducive to human happiness, both materially and spiritually. They reduce the emergence of hungry ghosts and the development of hungry ghosts. They support the development of our soul baby and our sense of ourselves as ensouled material beings. Artful illusion increases our skills, our capacity to trade and interact with each other, our capacity to create abundance, well-being. Artful illusion exists in a context of freedoms, individual freedoms, collective freedoms, liberties, and rights. It's part of the trust paradigm. There's enough in the world for all of us. And we can all dance together in our uniqueness, spiritually and materially. So think about how the practice of artful making, artful illusion, iterates through generations of painters, luthiers, farmers, doctors, architects. These are all arts solving human problems in the intention of creating a world that is human, generative, enlightening, and uplifting, the way a good family is, and how over time an entire society of people who behave in this manner through respective trades and guilds create an increasingly developed state of material being through which the immaterial or the spiritual can radiate. And there's a concept in Japanese design called wabi-sabi, which I think really reflects this well. If you have a very old piece of pottery that perhaps has cracks in it that reflect the many, many years it's been in use and its resiliency and the way it was made, these are cherished and valuable things. Contrast that to the world we've been inhabiting for the last 100 plus years, in which everything is cheaper and cheaper and uglier, and you just throw it all away. It completely steals from our souls. It's an outrage. So the first polarity of illusion is this pattern and trend toward more light, more awareness, an increase in consciousness. And if you've ever tried your hand at finished carpentry or designing and growing a garden, you quickly discover that it's not so easy to create those things. It's a life's work. And it's worthy, honorable work. Making. It's what we humans are exceptionally gifted at. And this is by the design of our Creator. And the remaining artifacts of our former world, though much has been destroyed, still reflect that until recently we inhabited a very rich ecosystem and operated within a highly evolved society. And that is an important question. Why? What happened? What changed? And it's one that I'll come back to in another podcast. But for now, I simply want to draw your attention to the idea of artful making as the positive polarity of illusion. And then there's the negative polarity, artless deception. The program known as the 20th century is a systemic example of this. It's made up of thousands of interconnected lies that at the meta level function to separate us from our awareness of our creative capabilities and to actively steal those abilities from us. Artless deception is the shadow side of illusion. It creates and sustains the conditions of unconsciousness behaviorally, socially, psychologically, and spiritually. Artless deception fosters the shutting down of our creative capacities, the active denial of our awareness that we're spiritual beings, and the severing of our direct connection with Source. COVID is an extreme example of artless deception, and it's profoundly evil in how it uses fear of death, the demonic's favorite illusion, to paralyze our interactional capacities and to socially engineer an anti-human world. But while it's extreme, it is nothing new. The good news is that COVID is a crack in the facade, and it's providing an opportunity for that which is behind it to finally be revealed. We're standing beneath the first of Janus' gates. The world we've known is ending. The world to come is not yet known. And each of us needs to ask ourselves as we journey, are we going to settle for more demonic lies and shadowy illusions? Because they will be offered. Or are we going to face the full truth about what has been hidden from us, both about ourselves and about our world? And this is a decision that humans will make. We will make the world by walking toward it. And as we journey, we will be accompanied by shadow and light and the polarities of illusion. The illusion of artful making, which is humanity's great power, and the illusion of artless deception, which belongs to the realm of the demonic. The world we create will be determined by how well we learn to recognize and work with them in service to increasing our consciousness of ourselves, our world, and our relationship to Source. So engage the practice of noticing energy. There are many ways to learn to do this. They all begin with being rooted in one's body. Noticing when energy is flowing and when it is blocked. Learning how to listen to yourself. Coming to know that soul baby. Recognizing your right and responsibility to engage as a maker and a doer. Because it is in the spirit of the maker, through inquiry, curiosity, openness, and expansion, that we counteract the paralysis of lies, fear, and control. And that's the trick. That's the key. So here we stand, and we're looking out at the wilderness. Let's imagine the place we're about to enter is a battlefield, one where all the players in the realm of desire are set loose to pursue with vengeance that which they long for most. Animals and humans, gods and jealous gods, demons and hungry ghosts. Whatever is truest to each one's nature will be revealed during this journey, this pilgrimage. And we will be changed as we enter this ground, this terrain. Pilgrimage is not a vacation. It's not glamping. This is backcountry. And anyone who's been in the wilderness knows that part of what makes wilderness wilderness is that you could die and no one will be coming to rescue you. Wilderness, material and spiritual, is a particular kind of testing ground, a particular type of terrain. The artist and military strategist Sun Tzu cataloged 9 different types of terrain, one of which he termed surrounded ground. A place where the entrance is narrow and the way out is tortuous, and where a few enemies can hide and easily pick off pilgrims as they move through. And strategically, Sun Tzu noted that in such conditions, a general has 2 choices. Figure out a strategy that will help you overcome the difficulty of surrounded ground, or you can close the escapes center yourself inside and wait. And the latter option leads naturally to the next type of terrain, the ninth type in his taxonomy, which he called death ground. This is the place where if you refuse to fight, you face certain death. But if you engage the battle as one of life and death, you will survive. I believe that we are at such a moment, and that this wilderness we are entering into is a surrounded ground. We can cling to the life we have, hand our power to some undeveloped government official, and lose our individual souls in the process. Or we can recognize the terrain we're in and our right to determine our own outcomes, possibly losing life in this moment, but retaining it over the long haul. The choice is ours. Pilgrimage is a unique journey. The route we take and our experience of terrain will differ. As Joseph Campbell once said, if you can see the path, it isn't yours. We each have to walk alone in terms of our unique discoveries. But we will also be walking together in the sense of being humans on a journey. Now and then, we will pass each other. Sometimes we might share a night at the same watering hole, or reprovision at a base camp at the same time. And at those moments, let's hope we're able to trade stories about the journey and what we're learning. And of course, we're never really alone. If you're open to learning to see through the veil of shadow and illusion, you can navigate from the world that was toward a very different world beyond that far horizon. Just remember that in the end, the new world is within us. We can each go anywhere we want to go. And so long as we understand that unlocking what lies within us is the real objective of this life, we can step out of this prison. We can remember who we are. And in doing so, we can reclaim the world that is our birthright. All for now. This is Sequoia. Peace.